You ever catch yourself obsessing over someone who clearly doesn't give you a second thought? Maybe it's that friend who never reaches out first, that family member who only remembers you exist when they need something, or that ex who moved on like you were nothing. And you're there, 3 in the morning, replaying conversations in your head, wondering what you did wrong, crafting perfect responses to arguments that will never happen. You check their social media even though you know it'll hurt. You rehearse what you'd say if you ran into them, how you'd prove you're doing fine, how you'd make them see what they lost. Meanwhile, they're out there living their life completely unbothered, probably not thinking about you at all. And that realization, that gut punch of knowing you matter so little to someone who takes up so much space in your mind, it's devastating. You feel pathetic, weak. You promise yourself you'll stop, that tomorrow you'll finally let it go. But tomorrow comes and there you are again, trapped in the same mental prison, giving away your power to people who wouldn't cross the street to help you. If you're exhausted from this cycle, if you're ready to understand why you do this and how to actually break free, keep watching. What I'm about to show you will completely shift how you see yourself and these relationships. There's something deeply human about caring what others think, about wanting to matter to the people in our orbit. We're wired for connection, for belonging, for significance in the eyes of others. But somewhere along the way, this natural desire mutates into something else entirely. It becomes a surveillance system we install in our own minds. We start monitoring ourselves through the imagined gaze of people who aren't even watching. We construct elaborate theaters in our heads where we're constantly performing for an audience that doesn't exist. And the cruelest part? We become both the prisoner and the guard, both the watched and the watcher. We police our own thoughts, judge our own feelings, punish ourselves for caring when we think we shouldn't. This is what the French philosopher Michel Foucault understood so deeply when he wrote about power and self-surveillance. He showed us that the most effective form of control isn't someone standing over you with a weapon. It's when you internalize that control so completely that you become your own jailer. Think about how this plays out in your daily life. You post something online and immediately start checking for their reaction. Did they see it? Did they like it? What does their silence mean? You craft your image, your words, your entire presentation of self with this invisible audience in mind. You edit yourself constantly, performing an elaborate dance for people who aren't even in the room. At work, at home, in your private moments, there's this voice narrating everything you do through their imagined perspective. That's exhausting, isn't it? Living like you're always on stage, always being evaluated, always falling short. You try to stop caring, you tell yourself it doesn't matter what they think. You make declarations about living for yourself, about not needing anyone's validation. But the harder you try to not care, the more evidence you create that you still do, because you're still organizing your entire existence around them, even if it's now about proving you don't need them. Foucault called this disciplinary power, the way we learn to monitor and regulate ourselves according to external norms and judgments. We become our own most vigilant observers, and in doing so, we trap ourselves more effectively than anyone else ever could. Here's what Foucault reveals that changes everything. The problem isn't that you care about these people. The problem is that you've given them a position of authority in your inner world that they never actually earned and don't actually hold. You've constructed an internalized version of them, a mental representation, and you've installed it as a judge in your own courtroom. But here's the twist. This judge isn't even accurate. It's not really them you're obsessing over. It's your projection of them, your fantasy of what they think, your imagination of their judgment. The real person is out there living their life, probably dealing with their own internalized judges and imaginary audiences. Meanwhile, you're in here arguing with a ghost, performing for a hologram, seeking approval from a simulation. Foucault helps us see that we're not trapped by other people's actual power over us. We're trapped by the power structures we've reproduced inside ourselves. We've taken external forms of surveillance and judgment and made them internal. We've become the panopticon, that prison design where inmates police themselves because they might be watched at any moment. Except in this case, there's no guard in the tower. There never was. We're watching ourselves on behalf of people who aren't even watching. This realization should be liberating, But at first it's often more disturbing, because it means you can't blame them anymore. You can't say they have power over you, that they're making you feel this way, that you're trapped by their judgment. They're just out there being human, as flawed and preoccupied and self-centered as everyone else. The prison is one you built. The guard is one you hired. The surveillance system is one you maintain. Every time you check their social media, you're choosing to walk into the panopticon. Every time you replay that conversation, you're choosing to sit in the judgment seat and condemn yourself. Every time you imagine their perspective on your life, you're choosing to give them authority they don't actually possess. But here's where it gets interesting. If you built this prison, you also have the blueprints. If you hired this guard, you can also fire them. If you installed this surveillance system, you can also dismantle it. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending you don't care. It's about understanding the mechanics of how you've constructed your own captivity and then systematically deconstructing it. Foucault distinguished between power over and power to. Power over is when someone else controls you, dominates you, restricts your freedom. Power to is your capacity to act, to create, to transform yourself and your world. What happens when you obsess over people who don't think about you is that you convert all your power to into their imagined power over. You take your energy, your attention, your creative capacity, your ability to shape your own life, and you funnel it all into maintaining their authority in your inner world. You become so focused on them, on what they think, on whether they notice, on how you appear in their eyes, that you stop exercising your actual power, which is the power to determine how you want to exist, what matters to you, who you want to become. This is what Foucault called technologies of the self, the practices and techniques through which we work on ourselves. Right now, you're using technologies of self-surveillance and self-judgment. You're using practices that keep you trapped, but you could use different technologies. You could develop different practices, practices of freedom, as Foucault called them, ways of relating to yourself that expand your possibilities rather than restricting them. Imagine if instead of monitoring yourself through their imagined gaze, you started asking different questions. Not what do they think of me, but what do I think of me? Not am I good enough for them, but what does good enough even mean, and who gets to define it? Not how can I prove my worth to them, but what would I do if I already knew I was worthy? These aren't just feel-good questions, they're revolutionary acts. Because every time you shift the center of evaluation from them to you, you're reclaiming power. You're moving from being an object in someone else's story to being the subject of your own. You're stepping out of the panopticon and into your own authority. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or disconnected. It means recognizing that the only relationship you can actually control, the only one you're responsible for, the only one that determines the quality of your existence, is your relationship with yourself. And right now, that relationship is abusive. You're treating yourself the way you fear they're treating you, with indifference, with contempt, with a constant message that you're not enough. And before I continue, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest, even if just with yourself. How long have you been doing this? How long have you been giving away your power to people who never asked for it and don't even know they have it? 1 year? 5 years? Your whole life? Because I know when you're in it, when you're living this pattern day after day, it feels like it's just who you are, like you're fundamentally broken, like everyone else figured out how to not care and you missed that lesson. But the truth is, you're not alone in this. There are thousands of people watching this video right now who are trapped in the same cycle, obsessing over the same kinds of people, asking themselves the same painful questions. And you know what helps more than any philosophy or explanation? Knowing that other people understand. So scroll down to the comments and write this: I've been giving my power away too. That's it. You don't need to explain who or why or for how long. Just that one sentence, because when you write that, you're not just admitting something to yourself, you're telling another person who's going to read your comment, you're not alone either. And that might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. Let me tell you about someone I'll call Sarah, though this could be any of us. Sarah spent 2 years of her life mentally tethered to a friend who had slowly but surely withdrawn from their relationship. This friend, let's call her Maya, never officially ended things. She just became perpetually busy, always having just missed Sarah's message, always meaning to get together soon but never following through. And Sarah, she couldn't let it go. She'd craft casual texts that took her an hour to write, trying to sound breezy while dying inside. She'd see Maya's Instagram stories, watching her laugh with other friends, and feel this sick mixture of longing and rage. Every interaction became evidence in an ongoing trial Sarah was conducting in her head. Did Maya seem warmer today? Was that comment dismissive? What did her emoji choice mean? Sarah knew it was unhealthy. Her other friends told her to move on. Her therapist asked why she was investing so much in someone who clearly wasn't investing back. But knowing something intellectually and being able to actually stop doing it are two different things entirely. Then something shifted. Sarah was reading about Foucault's concept of self-surveillance for a class, and she had this moment of recognition. She realized she'd constructed Maya as this all-seeing judge in her internal world. She was constantly monitoring herself through what she imagined Maya thought. Am I interesting enough? Am I successful enough? Do I seem like I'm doing fine without her? And then it hit her. Maya wasn't actually thinking about any of this. Maya was just living her life, dealing with her own stuff, probably not giving Sarah more than a passing thought. The person Sarah was obsessing over, the judge she'd installed in her head, wasn't even real. It was a simulation, a ghost, a story Sarah was telling herself, and that story was destroying her. So Sarah started an experiment, not trying to stop caring overnight because that never works, but observing the mechanism of her own surveillance. Every time she felt the urge to check Maya's social media, she'd pause and ask, what am I hoping to find? Every time she started crafting the perfect text, she'd stop and ask, who am I performing for right now? Every time she felt that familiar ache of not mattering enough, she'd ask, according to whom? She started noticing how much energy she was pouring into maintaining this internal Maya, this judge who existed only in her imagination. And slowly, deliberately, she started withdrawing that energy. Not through force or self-punishment, but through redirection. She started asking herself different questions. Not what would Maya think of this, but what do I think of this? Not am I enough for her, but what do I need? Not how can I win her back, but what kind of friendship do I actually want? It wasn't a straight line. There were still moments of backsliding, still nights of checking Instagram, still fantasies of the perfect reunion. But something fundamental had shifted. Sarah had stopped being a prisoner appealing to a judge and started being a person deciding how she wanted to live. The path forward isn't about trying to not care, because that's just another form of control, another way of organizing your existence around them. It's about recognizing that you've been using your precious energy, your irreplaceable attention, your limited time on this earth to maintain a power structure that only exists in your own head. And that recognition itself is the beginning of freedom. Start noticing when you're performing for the imaginary audience. When you're about to post something, pause. Who is this for? When you're replaying a conversation for the 100th time, stop. What am I trying to solve by thinking about this again? When you feel that familiar ache of not being enough, ask, in whose eyes am I not enough? These aren't rhetorical questions. Actually answer them. Write them down if you need to, because in the space between the question and the answer, something starts to loosen. You begin to see the mechanism of your own imprisonment, and you can't unsee it once you see it. Then start the harder work of building a different relationship with yourself. This isn't about affirmations or pretending you're fine when you're not. It's about slowly, painstakingly, learning to become your own source of validation instead of constantly seeking it externally. Ask yourself, what would I do today if I already knew I was enough? Not, fair if I believed I was perfect, but if I simply accepted that I'm a human being worthy of my own kindness and attention. What would I create? What would I say? How would I spend my time? Start there. Start with one action taken from that place. Then another. Then another. You're not trying to convince yourself you're enough. You're not trying to build unshakable self-esteem. You're simply practicing living from a different center of gravity, one located inside you rather than in someone else's imagined opinion. And every time you catch yourself sliding back into the surveillance, which you will, you don't punish yourself for it. You just notice it. You see the mechanism engaging, and you gently, firmly redirect your attention. You ask again, whose voice is this? What would I think if this were my friend's situation instead of my own? What matters to me, not to them, but to me? This practice. This is how you dismantle the panopticon you built in your own mind. You're also going to need to grieve, because what you're letting go of isn't just this person or their opinion. You're letting go of a fantasy, a hope, a version of yourself that needed their validation to feel complete. You're admitting that they were never going to give you what you needed, not because you're not worthy, but because no one can give you that. Only you can. And that's both devastating and liberating. It's devastating because it means you can't wait for them to finally see you, to finally choose you, to finally make you feel like you matter. It's liberating because it means you don't have to wait. You can start mattering to yourself right now. You can start choosing yourself right now. You can start treating yourself with the care and attention you've been desperately hoping they would give you. This is what Foucault meant by practices of freedom. Not freedom from feeling, not freedom from caring, but freedom from the power structures that keep you trapped in cycles of self-surveillance and self-judgment. Freedom to construct a different relationship with yourself, one based on curiosity rather than criticism, on growth rather than perfection, on self-determination rather than external validation. If you've made it this far in this video, I know you're not just looking for information, you're looking for a way out of this prison you didn't even know you were building. You're tired of giving your power away to people who don't even know they have it. You're ready to reclaim your attention, your energy, your life. And I want you to know, you don't have to do this alone. This channel exists for people like you, people who are done with surface-level advice, who want to understand the deeper mechanisms of their own minds, who have the courage to look at themselves honestly and do the hard work of transformation. Every week I bring reflections like this, exploring the deepest corners of human experience through philosophy and psychology. If you want to continue this journey of self-understanding, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Not because I need the numbers, but because you deserve a space where you can think differently, feel differently, be differently. And if this video touched something true inside you, leave a like so more people who need to hear this can find it. You're not alone in this struggle. There's a whole community here of people doing the same work you are. So here's where we've arrived. You've spent so long constructing them as authorities in your inner world, giving them power they never claimed and don't actually hold. You've surveilled yourself on their behalf, judged yourself through their imagined eyes, restricted your freedom based on what you think they might think. And all of it, every bit of it, was a story you told yourself. Not because you're broken or weak, but because you're human. Because we all learn these patterns, these technologies of self-surveillance from a world that profits from our insecurity. But now you know the mechanism. You see how you've been both prisoner and guard. You understand that the panopticon exists only as long as you maintain it. And understanding is the first step toward dismantling. Every moment of your life from this point forward is a choice. Will you check their social media, or will you close the app and do something that actually nourishes you? Will you replay that conversation again, or will you redirect your attention to the present moment? Will you seek validation from someone who can't give it, or will you learn to validate yourself? These aren't easy choices. Some days you'll make them, and some days you won't. But each time you choose yourself over the imaginary judge, each time you redirect your power from obsessing over them to building the life you actually want, you're practicing freedom. You're proving to yourself that you were never as trapped as you thought. The door was always open. You just had to stop staring at the walls long enough to notice. The people who don't think about you, the ones who've taken up residence in your head rent-free, they're going to keep living their lives. And that's fine, that's as it should be. They're not villains in your story. They're just people, as self-absorbed and distracted and flawed as everyone else. The question isn't how to make them think about you. The question is why you need them to. What void are you trying to fill with their attention? What are you hoping their validation will prove about you? Because whatever it is, whatever you think their recognition would give you, You already have it, or you never did and never will, because it was an illusion. From the start, you don't need anyone to grant you permission to matter. You don't need anyone to confirm your worth. You don't need anyone to see you for you to exist fully and completely. You are already whole, already here, already enough. Not because you've achieved anything or because you've convinced anyone, but simply because you exist. And the real work is learning to live from that knowledge. Stop focusing on those who never thought about you. Start focusing on the one person who should, you.